Happy Memorial Day, everyone. I hope that you are settled in and ready because we have a packed show for you today. First of all, we have to revisit the Senate Twink because apparently he has no remorse for screwing in the Senate. We also need to talk about some trans rock climbers who are sending a message to Trump, and we are going to discuss Diddy's connection to the Mafia. So, my friends, the Senate Twink is just the gift that keeps on giving, and he just did yet another interview, actually with one of my favorite writers over at New York Magazine, and there is just so much to unpack. Now, if you guys don't remember, we actually talked about this young man just a couple of months ago. We did kind of a recap, what has transpired in his life since that fateful day when he decided that he should have sex in the Senate, but he is back to give us even more juicy information. Before we get into that, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And of course, ring that notification bell to stay up to date on all of our episodes. And as a reminder, I am going on tour this spring. We still have tickets available, and we added 2 new shows in Dallas and in Austin because those were sold out. So if you want to get tickets and come join in on all the fun, you can visit brettcooper.com. So the crux of what we talked about the last time that we covered this young man was the fact that he was asking for privacy, and yet nothing about his life was private at all. In fact, he had created an OnlyFans, and he had changed his Instagram handle to be Senate Twink. He was really trying to build upon this scandal, albeit it was a little late. And so I think that is the purpose of this new interview that he did with New York Magazine. And surprise, he never actually wanted the privacy that he claimed he wanted right after the sex scandal took place. And even bigger surprise, he's actually not sorry at all for doing what he did. In fact, he did it because he was bored. So the article reads, listening to him recount his days getting paid by Congress to do nothing, quote, I would beg the chief of staff or whoever for work. I had nothing to do, is cause enough to wonder whether Elon Musk's blathering about government inefficiency is, on its face, well-founded. What is it that they say about idle hands? Quote, I would come in 9 hours a day, sit there bored out of my effing mind. So yeah, I'm going to entertain myself and F in a room. Specifically, Part 216. So he was bored. Guys, I mean, why are we even upset at this young man? It was just government inefficiency and he was bored, so what else was he gonna do? I mean, this so reminds me of Denise Richards' daughter, where she was like, I wanted to move out, it was a candy store or OnlyFans. It was sitting at my desk scrolling on TikTok or having sex in the Senate hearing room. I mean, guys, I think that there are things you can do in between these two extremes. I don't know if we've lost nuance in the world, but that's just what I'm feeling right now. Anyway, continuing on with this article, apparently his therapist told him that he was subconsciously sabotaging his career. He also talked about how he is not the only one who was engaged in this kind of behavior, and in his anger and frustration with this scandal exploding, he thought about throwing everybody else under the bus who has effed in a Senate room. The writer Brock says, quote, in some sense, I effed in the Senate because I was miserable and wanted a way out. He's trying to hold no grudges and has no desire to suss out his leaker. Quote, I had a half second where I was like, I know so many people who have effed in the Senate, I could throw people under the bus to water out my own scandal. Excuse me? You know so many people. Like, I understand that we live in a deranged, hypersexual society. I understand that there are things that go on in government. I mean, we all watched the Madison Cawthorn scandal unfold, where he basically said that there were sex parties happening in DC with members of Congress. Like, we all saw that happen. There have been rumors. But now the Senate Twink is saying, I literally have names of other people who have done this. That is literally insane. But also, it's 2025, so at this point, nothing should surprise me anymore. Now, in looking at this press tour and this whole interview that he did, and the article is so funny, so you should go read the entire thing, but I can't help but wonder if he's doing this whole press tour and doing the interviews with New York Magazine and New York Post because at the time, he threw away his chance to capitalize on this sex scandal. Because if you guys remember from the previous episode, he cried victim. He said, oh my gosh, all this outrage is homophobia. He checked himself into a mental facility. He moved across the world to Australia to start a new life and then wasn't happy and wasn't making any money. So then a year later, he changed his Instagram name to Senate Twink and tried to start an OnlyFans to kind of capitalize on it, but obviously that wasn't working. So now he's back in our faces trying to kind of rehash things, being very bold and very brazen about it, probably, in my mind, as a marketing strategy for his OnlyFans page. And listen, I am not promoting this in the slightest. You guys know how I feel about OnlyFans and sex workers, but I'm just saying, had he taken this approach a year ago, right after the scandal took place, he would probably be one of the biggest OnlyFans creators on the platform platform. He would be an icon in different parts of the world, and yet now he is having to crawl his way back to relevancy thanks to interviews like this, which, you know, are very entertaining to me, so I can't even be mad about it. Now, speaking of twinks, we need to turn our attention to the drag queen and the coalition that is called Trans is Nature, who, guys, they are just truly making a difference in the world, and they are doing that by hanging trans flags in national parks. And yes, you heard that correctly. Last Tuesday, this coalition of LGBTQ rock climbers under the name Trans is Nature hung a 55-foot trans flag at Yosemite National Park. I mean, guys, so brave. I mean, them hanging that flag is even braver than them summiting El Capitan. This is just incredible. Snaps for them. They are truly changing the world. And guys, of course, they did this. They did this incredibly brave thing to send a message to Donald Trump, the big bad orange man. And according to this USA Today article, they did this because they are, quote, done being polite. And thanks to my friends over at Ground News, I know that while this article is very left-leaning, it is also highly factual. Now, Ground News, as always, cuts through the noise with an unbiased perspective and shows both sides of every story, prioritizing honesty over everything. Their unique technology even allows users to compare how different sides of the corporate media are reporting on a certain story, making sure that you see all sides and truly stay informed. And from my perspective, they make sure that I stay on top of all the stories that I'm covering so that I can bring you the latest and most honest updates. Now, in addition to that, one thing that I love is that Ground News' blind spot feed brings you the stories that have gotten little to no coverage on either side of the aisle, making sure that you always stay informed, instead of letting big tech or their algorithms decide what you see. So if you are truly ready to break free from media bias and stay informed with transparent news consumption, now is the time to join Ground News. And when you go to groundnews.com/Brett or scan the QR code on the screen, you can get the same premium plan that I use, but for nearly half the price. That is groundnews.com/Brett if you want to get unbiased news and hold the media accountable for only $5 a month. But guys, I don't want to just tell you about this insane story. Just take a look at the individual who went up there and hung this flag.
We carry the largest trans pride flag to ever be flown in a national park and unfurled it on the side of El Cap to prove a point, that trans is natural. The Trump administration and transphobes...
Did you see what was written on that flag? Fly higher than hate. Oh, so profound, thank you.
That being trans is unnatural, but species that can transition sexes can be found on every continent and in every ocean on planet Earth. So call it a protest, call it a celebration. We are bringing elevation to liberation. So every trans person knows that they have people that love them in their corner. The people united will never be defeated.
Okay, well, the people united might never be defeated, but your flag will be defeated because this is completely and utterly ridiculous. And also, my favorite part of the entire video is where the drag queen is like hugging that girl and is going, this is so natural. Meanwhile, he's in an entire full beat of drag queen makeup. That's literally the most unnatural thing I've ever heard of. You have this beautiful, rugged, natural landscape, and you're sitting here pretending to be a woman with insane makeup on. Like, I'm sorry, you're just not going to convince us otherwise. So kind of backing into this story, that individual that you saw on the screen, the one with the full beat of makeup, that is one of Time Magazine's Next Generation Leaders and National Geographic's Change Makers, and that would be drag queen Patagonia, aka Win Wiley. And guys, if that individual and that name sounds familiar, it is because at this rate, I don't even know how many episodes I have done about him. Like, genuinely, Patagonia seems to pop up every year around springtime in a different national park, in a different huge drag queen outfit, working with a different brand, simply to promote his agenda. And the agenda is always that trans is so natural. It is as natural as these national parks, and they deserve a place in the national parks. And it's so hilarious to me because no one is saying you don't have a place in nature. You are literally free to go hang that insane flag in Yosemite National Park. You are free to frolic in dresses and full makeup and film your videos in the middle of national parks for years now. You work with brands like the North Face, so I'm sorry if I don't believe that you are genuinely, truly oppressed. Like, it just doesn't make sense. Now, the other ridiculous thing that we need to talk about that you probably heard in this video is that this coalition's mission is to promote the idea that transgenderism is naturally occurring in nature through various species. It's not just naturally occurring in humans, but guys, other animals and other plants change their gender literally for the sole purpose of reproduction. It is a scientific transformation. If you change your gender, you cannot reproduce. That is not something that happens naturally, no matter which way you cut it. That was a bad joke, but you get what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not like these fish and these plants are going off to surgeons to get a fake, beautifully made vagina. Beautiful is an overstatement. Your custom boutique vagina from your plastic surgeon. The last thing that I will say is that obviously this caused an uproar on social media, and everybody was pointing the finger at the park itself, at Yosemite, saying that they had okayed this, that it was a political statement that Yosemite was making, but that is not the case at all. I am here to defend Yosemite National Park. The park was quick to ask for the flag to be removed. I think it was already taken down, thank God, because Yosemite does not need to be embroiled in political debates about gender identity, because national parks truly are for everyone, regardless of your background, your gender, your age, whoever you are, you can go and enjoy it, and that should be the message. Now, on a more serious note, I think it is time that we turn our attention back to Diddy. Week 2 of the trial has ended, and we have a lot of updates. So as I said in my last Diddy episode, the defense was obviously going to make it seem like Cassie was a willing participant in all of this and all of the freak-offs, and that is exactly what they did. This team of lawyers, as we discussed, is just full of heavy hitters who play dirty, and they did not tone it down at all when they were cross-examining Cassie Ventura, who obviously, if you guys are following the story now, is Diddy's longtime ex-girlfriend. And throughout their cross-examination, they were focusing in on one specific thing, and that was the text messages between Diddy and Cassie. Here is one example. This is from 2012. Combs told Cassie that he wanted to FO one last time tonight, using initials for freak off, FO. Cassie replied, "What?" And Combs said, "You can't read?" And then Cassie replied, "I don't want to freak off for the last time. I want it to be the first time for the rest of our lives." Here's another exchange they brought up. This one was from August of 2009. Combs asked when she wanted the next encounter to be, and she replied, "I'm always ready to freak off." 2 days later, Cassie sent an explicit message, and he replied in eager anticipation. She responded, "Me too. I just want it to be uncontrollable." Combs' lawyers have insisted that all of the sex at the freak-offs was completely consensual. Later that year, however, she also sent Combs messages that she was frustrated with the state of their relationship and needed something more from him than just sex. So, obviously, we know that their relationship was incredibly sexual, we know that it was volatile, and we do have these texts. Like, everybody can see these, she talked about them in her cross-examination, and in my personal opinion, I feel like it's going to be hard for the defense to contradict everything that the prosecution has brought forward that demonstrates that he was blackmailing her and that she was terrified of him. And so using her text messages that show that she was saying that she likes the freak-offs doesn't necessarily mean that it was all completely consensual if she was truly scared for her life and actually being blackmailed in the way that we have been told that she was blackmailed. And of course, she's not going to push back against him or do anything to make him angry when we have now seen the kind of man that he is and the things that he would threaten to do to her. I mean, if the only evidence was her word versus these text messages, that would be one thing that would make it a lot more complicated, but we know at this point that it's not. And the prosecution only strengthened their argument about this blackmail, about this power imbalance, when Cassie's mom, Regina Ventura, took the stand. And she testified that Combs, in anger over one of his and Cassie's many breakups, threatened to release one of these freak-off videos of Cassie if they did not give him $20,000. And so her parents were trying to protect her. They frantically took out a $20,000 loan to send him the money. They never spoke to him. They just wanted to protect her. But like, those are the types of things that he would do and what he would hold over her. So is that actually consensual? I think that is something that the jury is just going to have to decide. Now, in addition to Cassie's mother, we also saw some other new faces take the stand, including close friends and collaborators of Cassie's. But before we get into their testimony, which is just heartbreaking, I do want to take a break to tell you about my sponsor, 7 Weeks Coffee. Now, 7 Weeks Coffee is Alex's and my go-to coffee that we literally drink every single day. Now, as you guys know, we're very picky about what ingredients we bring into our home and put into our bodies, and 7 Weeks Coffee hits the mark. This coffee is mold-free, it is pesticide-free, it is shade-grown and low acid, and it is organically farmed. Not to mention, even better, they have an incredible mission that we love to support. 7 Weeks Coffee is America's pro-life coffee company on a mission to help fund the pro-life movement one cup of coffee at a time. They donate 10% of every sale to support pregnancy care centers and pro-life organizations across the country, and at this point, they have raised over $900,000 for these centers and have saved thousands of lives. And the reason why they're called 7 Weeks Coffee is because at 7 weeks, a baby is the size of a coffee bean. They truly make an incredible product, and I love that I can stand behind both the ingredients, the product, and the values of this incredible company. So if you are ready to make the switch, go to 7weekscoffee.com/Brett and save 15% off forever when you subscribe, plus get a free gift with your order. And exclusively for my viewers, use code Brett at checkout for an extra 10% off your first order. That is a 25% total savings on your first order plus a free gift. Just use code Brett at checkout. Now, in addition to my morning cup of coffee, the other staple of my morning routine routine is my skincare. And I am so excited to be promoting Nimi Skincare again. Now, if you guys have been around for the long haul, you probably remember I worked with them years ago as one of my first ever sponsors. It has been so amazing to watch their mission and their company grow. And since the last time we worked together, they launched a brand new, clean line of high-powered products made with ingredients that you can trust and feel great about putting on your body's largest organ, your skin. And just this month, they have introduced the beginnings of their body care collection. Now, I started using Nimi again at the beginning of this year after getting pregnant because my hormones obviously have been going crazy. I was getting terrible acne. I was struggling to keep my skin under control. And I decided that I should probably start washing my face with something other than just my micellar water. And they totally changed the game for me, and they got my skin back on track, literally, guys, within days. And Nimi Skincare is more than just skincare. Their company also represents amazing values, and their products are proudly made in the USA. So because of that, they're not forced to increase their prices when tariffs and costs rise, so you can always trust that you are getting a great value. So if you are ready to make the switch, take Nimi's simple skincare quiz on their website and get a skincare routine curated just for your skin type and concerns. Head on over to nimiskincare.com, that is N-I-M-I skincare.com, and use code Cooper for 15% off your order. Your skin and your wallet will thank you. So going back to these new testimonies, here is one instance of abuse that her best friend witnessed, and she took the stand, and Morgan, her name, testified that the second incident took place in Jamaica in 2013, where they were on a group vacation. She said that while Cassie was using the bathroom, Combs became angry that she was taking too long and set out to find her. Morgan then allegedly heard guttural screams and ran to the hall to find Combs dragging Cassie outside by her hair. Outside, she allegedly managed to get up, and Combs then pushed her onto the ground, where she hit her head on the bricks. Morgan testified that she believed Cassie was knocked out, but her friend later ran into the woods barefoot. Morgan said that when she found Cassie, she hid in a ditch for what felt like hours while Combs searched the property for them. I mean, guys, at every turn, all the stories that we hear are horrifying. Like, I think we know now the kind of relationship that this was. But again, even though we're hearing all of these stories, I do want to clarify that this case isn't about abuse. It is about the racketeering. It is about sex trafficking. And so stories like this obviously give us insight into his character. They support everything else, but this isn't what he's being charged for. Now, in addition to these friends and Cassie's mom, a man named George Kaplan also testified. That is Diddy's former assistant. And this one actually does really give legs to the racketeering charge, because he would set up hotel rooms for Diddy. He would pick up drugs for Diddy, paying for all of them in cash, and he also testified that Diddy constantly threatened his job. And so what I'm seeing here is we are now moving outside of just Cassie. Obviously, this is where the lawsuit started. This is what really brought attention to everything that Diddy was doing, but again, it is going to get so much bigger than just this relationship. Now, this federal case does stem from Cassie's 2023 lawsuit, which we talked about last week. But even though this case is about a very particular set of charges, I do think that we should quickly look at the other civil suits that are up against Diddy. After Cassie's very public lawsuit and less than 24-hour settlement that, again, we talked about last week, 70 other civil lawsuits were filed. Now, to give you guys a timeline, Diddy's house was raided in March of last year, so this was 2024. In September, he was arrested and he was charged, and there were 9 lawsuits that were filed before his house was raided. There were 5 in between his house being raided and him being arrested, and then over 50 different lawsuits have been filed since his arrest. Now, around 5 of these lawsuits allege that the victim was a minor at the time of the incident. Most of these accusers are female, but there are quite a few men that have also come forward in these suits. And what has possibly been an even bigger conversation than anything else we're talking about is that some of these lawsuits are also against other celebrities, which is not the case in this federal lawsuit. They are not involved in Cassie and Diddy. This is just about Diddy. Now, the most notable of these lawsuits is the case that was brought against Diddy and Jay-Z for drugging and raping a girl when she was 16 years old. A third female celebrity who has not been named allegedly stood by and watched, but she was not included in that lawsuit. And this lawsuit has now been dropped. That came out in December, at the beginning of December. Aaron Hall is involved in another lawsuit from a woman who alleges that the two of them, Diddy and Aaron, raped her, and Diddy then choked her. In another lawsuit, Diddy's first employee at Bad Boy Records, a music producer, is being accused of gang raping a 17-year-old girl with Diddy and another celebrity that has not been named. Rodney Jones Jr., aka Lil Rod, has accused Diddy of grooming him and then passing him off to actor Cuba Gooding Jr., who has already pleaded guilty to forcible touching in a previous case. And then, guys, this is even crazier to me. 2 of Diddy's sons are named in separate lawsuits against them and Diddy for sexual abuse. Those are his sons, Justin and Christian. Lucian Grange, this is Sophia Richie's father-in-law. He is the CEO of Universal Music Group. He was also named as a defendant in a lawsuit for aiding and abetting Diddy's sex trafficking and racketeering, although his involvement was dropped from that specific suit. OBJ has been named in one of the most shocking lawsuits when a young woman claims that she was gang raped by Diddy, OBJ, and other men after she accused Diddy of killing Tupac. I mean, there's so much here. And so the public is thinking about all of these cases. We have read articles about all of this. And so even me, like going into this huge 8-week-long trial, I was like, oh my gosh, it's all coming out. This is everything. But it's not. Like, this isn't like Epstein, where there was a possibility for everything to come out in that one big case. It is just about Diddy and Cassie. And this has understandably made this case very confusing because people, like myself, were mixing these civil suits with what he is being charged with right now federally. I mean, when Diddy was first arrested, we all saw the pictures of his notorious white parties. They began flooding the airwaves, and people were claiming that all the people who were in those photos that attended those parties were actually attending freak-offs. The white parties were the freak-offs. Everyone in the photos was implicated in all of these cases. I mean, similarly, everybody immediately started saying that Justin Bieber had been sex trafficked by him. The internet began spiraling, quickly spinning rumors into truth. We had no idea what was going on, and from what I heard, just because obviously I had been talking to some people close to Bieber, based on what I have heard from that camp and what Bieber has now said in a public statement, he was not sexually abused by Diddy. And so I just want to say that here once and for all. Now, I do want to take a step back because we all saw the videos, we watched Justin grow up, and so I think we can say that, was Justin put in uncomfortable positions as a young man? Yes, absolutely. Was he sexualized by the media and the music industry as a whole? Yes. Was he asked or pushed to engage in spiritually dangerous and immoral activities? Yes. Those aren't rumors. I've actually heard that from people, but he denies that even though that might have happened, he denies that he was a Diddy victim. Now, it's also important to note, kind of in light of talking about everything with Justin and how this industry operates, that Diddy is just the tip of the iceberg. And most people out there, including myself, do not believe that he acted alone, not just with his freak-offs, but with the degradation of this industry as a whole. I mean, think about all the names that we just mentioned in those 63 lawsuits. And guys, interestingly, there is one person that just keeps getting brought up time and time again, and he also just keeps getting away with it. And that man would be Clive Davis, the aging, very much aging, co-founder of Bad Boy Records. Now, before we get into how insane this story is and giving you the backstory, I just need to paint a picture for you, because when all of this started, this was a very, very different time. So imagine that we are all in the 70s, and the government has just begun cracking down on organized crime because the RICO Act was signed into law in 1970. So why did this act come about? Well, the Mafia had infiltrated all of the big industries, and the music industry for the Mafia was a no-brainer, including jukebox plays, record sales, nightclub entry fees, and it gave mob bosses the ability to control and extort labels and artists through these avenues, including distribution through jukeboxes, control of the venues where artists got to perform, all of that. They had their hands in everything. And another part of this, something that the mob also had their hands in, was referred to as indies. Now, these indies were people, and they were people who were hired by labels to secure airplay for songs, often using cash and gifts, drugs, or other incentives that would get the radio stations to play these certain songs. And this was not something that the record labels were doing overtly. They had to do this through third parties because this was actually illegal. It was illegal to pay for airtime without disclosing it, and this was called payola. So now that you have that context, we can introduce you to Clive Davis. Now, this is the man that is behind some of the world's most iconic bands and artists throughout the entire music industry, and he is also the man behind Diddy's rise. I mean, this man has worked with everybody from Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Chicago, Santana, Billy Joel, Bruce Springsteen, Aerosmith, Earth, Wind, and Fire, Neil Diamond, my personal favorite. I used to fall asleep to him every single night growing up, Pink Floyd, Whitney Houston, Alan Jackson, Brooks and Dunn, Brad Paisley, Usher, Outkast, and Pink. But, in the 70s, he was the music industry. If you were somebody who was working with Clive Davis, it was almost a sure bet that you were going to be successful. Now, Clive started his career at Columbia Records, and he quickly rose to the top because of his talent and his eye for music, and all thanks to Clive Davis himself. Columbia Records was a powerhouse in the 70s, and their revenue was up significantly. One article from around that time says that rock has moved from only 15% of Columbia's volume to more than 50%, and CBS record sales have risen from 170 million to 340 million each year. Clive Davis, was able to win over top talent by paying well and offering considerable artistic freedom. John Phillips of the Mamas and Papas said, quote, "He always sent the limousines and the flowers at the right time. So everything for Clive and Columbia Records was looking up. The music industry was changing daily, all thanks to Clive. And then in May, in 1973, Clive Davis was abruptly fired after a Columbia Records internal investigation. Now, Columbia has publicly stated that the reason for the termination of his contract early was that he was misappropriating funds. But everyone in the music industry who was clued in that knew Clive knew that it had to be more than that. Take a look at this Time article from 1973. They said, others in the records business, where expense money is thrown around, doubted that the CBS charges against Davis could be the full explanation. To them, the action against Davis seems unduly harsh in an industry that abounds in stories of much worse transgressions, chiefly the providing of drugs to rock groups and disc jockeys. Quote, if we had somebody really important who wanted dope, we would probably give it to him, says the vice president of one of CBS's biggest competitors. I think Davis is taking the rap for everybody. Now, in addition to all of that and those theories, looking through news articles from around the time, it is very obvious that Columbia was being investigated for payola, as this internal investigation was happening with Clive Davis. In fact, here's a headline from that year that reads, Clive Davis ousted, payola cover-up charge. Columbia Records president is fired from CBS amid allegations of misuse of funds and providing drugs to artists and disc jockeys. Now, the rumor at the time, and sort of still is that Columbia used Davis as a cover-up so that the company would not be investigated further. This man was the fall guy. They were basically saying there was nothing to see here. Yes, our president was funneling money, but that was just for personal reasons. Nothing to see here. He was most definitely not working with the mafia, doing payola, or supplying people with drugs. And guys, you also need to understand how big being charged with payola with something like this could have been. Like, Columbia Records would not have survived that scandal. And again, this was not something that was hush-hush. Another article from around the time reads that the government is probing an elaborate scheme in which Columbia and perhaps other record companies may have been bilked of many millions of dollars. Columbia Records alone reportedly lost $2 million. Investigators were trying to find out whether the mafia had got a firm foothold in the record industry or whether Columbia Records scandal was an isolated incident. Now, here is where the mafia ties really begin. So a month before Clive was fired, one of his employees, one of his close associates, was also fired for misappropriation of funds, and his office was interestingly sealed for investigation. And this man had been more directly linked to the mob, specifically the Genovese crime family. And it's all written about in another article from 1973. So this one reads, the first rumors had begun to fly during, quote, a week to remember. David Winshaw, 52, vice president of artist relations at Columbia, had been busted. He had been locked out of his 12th floor office a couple of weeks ago, and there was talk about prostitution and drugs. The FBI, the rumors said, had invaded CBS's Black Skyscraper and seized files from Winshaw's office, and CBS had cordoned off the room and fired the 11-year veteran. Winshaw, it was said, was close to Clive Davis and was variously known around the company and in the business as Davis's royal procurer, or Clive's pimp, or the all-around Dr. Feelgood. He had, the hearsay went, been moved over to special projects and took care of conventions, providing any necessary entertainment for Columbia executives and favored guests. Now he, David Winshaw, unlike Clive, did serve a year in prison, and his story seemed to kind of die down there until 2021 when Winshaw gave another interview. And in this interview, he said that everyone knew he took the fall for Clive Davis. Federal investigators who had launched an ultimately fruitless search for evidence of payola would allege that Winshaw had conspired with a member of the Genovese crime family to defraud CBS of $75,000 through sham bills from non-existent companies, a scheme that earned Winshaw a 1-year jail sentence. Nobody has suggested that Davis knew a thing about the involvement of the mob, though skeptics contend that a micromanager like Clive Davis had to know about the invoices that Winshaw drafted. According to Winshaw, there is little doubt on the matter. Now 80 years old and living in Florida, he said in a brief phone interview that, quote, everyone knows I took the fall for Davis. How does a man run a bar mitzvah that he doesn't know about? The circumstances of his exit, Winshaw says, ruined me, though he still admires Davis's talents. I have no animosity. The guy doesn't want to know me. That's fine. Looking back, some former colleagues say that CBS got spooked by the payola investigation and jettisoned Davis, hoping to mollify the government and stave off penalties that might jeopardize its broadcasting licenses. And guys, the reason why I did this entire history lesson on the music industry in the 70s and Clive Davis and Columbia Records is because it is simply so wild to me that while David served a year in prison for all of this, Clive walked away free and maintained his career. And then, many years later, in 1994, he fatefully started Bad Boy Records with none other than P. Diddy. Now, to bring it all back to the case at hand and the freak-offs, we don't know how involved Clive was with Diddy's affairs. We can just put it that way. But we do know that Clive was responsible for starting Diddy's career and that they were very close friends. And so it's fair and it's very valid for all of us to wonder why and how P. Diddy was able to get away with all of these crimes for so long and what led him down such a dark, twisted path. And it's just interesting, whether it's related to Diddy's cover-ups or not, that his mentor, his confidant, his close friend, his business partner, was tied to one of the biggest payola scandals in music industry history and has walked away scot-free from crimes, also including tax evasion, for his entire very long life. And I mean, hey, maybe Diddy just learned from the best. Now, while a lot of this is unverified, a lot of people think that it goes even deeper than that, even darker than that. A lot of people in the music industry have spoken out about this relationship. For example, Suge Knight, who is a rapper who is in prison for manslaughter, has claimed multiple times over the years that music executives, including Clive Davis, have used sexual abuse, drugs, and alcohol to control their artists. Take a listen to this clip from a recent interview he did with Chris Cuomo.
To me, that sounds like what I hear when people are talking about abusive situations, you know, hurt people, that someone was sexually abused, they wind up being a perpetrator. Is that what you're suggesting about Sean Combs, that he was sexually abused and he now sexually abuses?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think he repeat what was done to him. And like I said, if you look at Russell Simmons, you know the truth. Andre Rail, you know the truth. Clyde Davis, you know the truth. Jimmy Iovine, you know the truth. The industry is a quick business. It's been like that for a long time. And the casting couch is real, but it's for women and men.
And throughout this interview, which was done 7 months ago, he offered horrifying examples of what that looked like. For example, Knight claimed that Diddy was, quote, taught by the people before him, and he did to the younger people after him. Quote, it is an industry that, according to Knight, has a long history of sexually abusing and assaulting its newest members. He said one practice called an egg test went as follows. And just for warning, this is insane, but he says, quote, those guys pull their pants down and bent over. They stick the egg up their ass, their eggs break. They say they're not ready yet. They ain't put enough work in. This is Hollywood. And then he goes on to say that the only place where you would put in the work so that your egg wouldn't break was at these types of parties. It's like, guys, it's so insane. And yet we're hearing this from so many people. Like, at this point, it can't be a conspiracy that this is how Hollywood and these entertainment industries run. And guys, in every one of these stories, from people other than just Suge Knight, in every story, Clive Davis gets brought up. His influence even made its way to Sean Ryan's podcast. Now, of course, over the years, Clive Davis's team has denied all of these allegations. They say that he knew nothing, that he was never involved, and these days, he plays the role of the geriatric old man who just won't answer questions.
A lot of people are curious about the status of P. Diddy.
Status of what?
P. Diddy. Diddy.
Like Puppy. The status of Puppy.
But as we've learned from Justin Bieber and others like him, the abuse and the blackmail and the control happening within the music industry and Hollywood runs deep. And this story is still only getting started. So next week, we will be back for another Diddy update because the trial is still ongoing. And also, we haven't even gotten into the beef between Diddy, Tupac, Suge Knight, and Biggie that led to the murder of 2 of those men.
Do you remember everything that you put all of us through the last time you rode? You will not get on that bull.
Well, then what are we gonna do about Cody?
I'm gonna be okay, Mom.
$750,000 for first place. You got a better idea, I'm all ears.
We've got some incredible news. The rodeo legend's gonna compete for the first time in years.
Give me the green light! Joe Wainwright. 3-time world champ. Rides again.
This is gonna be big.
This ain't the senior circuit.
Good luck. You're gonna need it.
Joe Wainwright competing at over 50 years younger.
I'm grandfathered in, right?
Well, you right about that granddad part.
Oh! His grandson's sick, and he's got to earn money. That's why he's here. You gotta focus, Joe. In my seat, I only ask once.
That went well.
Yeah, very.
Be patient with her. She loves you fiercely.
Can Joe Wainwright keep up?
I'm fine.
Of course you will.
That's a genuine, true legend right there.
Here we go.
Come on, Joe, get it!